Good morning, everyone. Today is January 11th, 2023, and my name is Jordan Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer behind this YouTube channel and every other social media platform pretty much out there, and my own website, Nonconformist Conscience. Let's talk about the astrology of this week. There is a lot going down this week. That's kind of, if you think about the full moon that we just had in Cancer, and if you go back and you watch the video or read the written report from last week, you'll know what I'm talking about if you didn't do that. For those of you who have, this week really builds upon that full moon. And it's interesting to think about because when we're thinking about the full moon, we think about, oh, this is emotional dynamics culminating, so coming to an end. But the thing with the astrology of this week, we need to think about it as if a ripple or another small wave is coming out of that full moon that just happened in the sign of Cancer. So the things that were culminating and rising to the surface with the Cancer full moon are now things that are coming up, and not just emotionally, but for a lot of people, external events are being triggered so that they can work with the emotional dynamics that stem from the external triggers. What I really want to concentrate on in this video is Mars stationing and also Venus squaring the nodal axis. And I will show you a chart in just a minute to, go over that. So let me break down. Mars has been retrograde since October. Oh, let me make sure I have the date correct. Yes, October 30th. And tomorrow it will be in direct motion, meaning that it will no longer be retrograde. But today it is stationing. And whenever a planet stations, it's an intensification of the archetypal nature of that planet by sign. In this case, since it is, in the sign of Virgo, and it has been retrograde. The intensification is really about pushing people to go within. Mars is ruled by Mercury, who is retrograde right now, who is going to stay retrograde until the 18th, so next week. And so there is an intensification for a lot of people about the way in which they've learned things, the way in which they've defined things, and the way in which they are recontextualizing, and through that process, needing to make new choices. New choices is the name of the game here. And this is really speaking to also the full picture of the astrology for this week, especially with Venus squaring the nodal axis. So not only is Mars stationing today, so it's appearing to stand still in the sky instead of moving backwards, retrograding, or direct moving forwards. So there's this intensification, and because it is ruled by Mercury, who is retrograde, we are all being called to not only take responsibility for our choices, because Mercury is in Capricorn, but Mercury retrograde is really, really about going within and using our intuitive faculties, or what my kids like to call their spidey senses. So there is a need to be able to understand, what do I need, what is right for me, what is no longer working, and getting those questions answered from the intuitive side. There's nothing external outside that is going to be able to tell you this is what you should be doing, because we're looking at conditioning factors here. It's Capricorn. So this is where we have experienced societal, religious, or familial conditioning in regards to our values and what our needs are. So a really good way to look at this is, when you were little, what was the underlying dynamic that was imprinted on you about how you were to go out and to get your needs met? And through what your needs were, what gave you value and meaning? This is the whole reformulation, and there's nothing outside right now that is going to tell you what you need and what you value. The reformulation process comes from you asking those for yourself and creating a sovereignty within you. It's really coming back to this place that all of us have of our natural selves, of our natural states, where we weren't conditioned, and really holding one accountable and responsible for, how do I meet my own needs? What do I value? And really looking at how we have been psychologically conditioned to go about getting that. So there are things that are going to be coming up for people this week, whereas they were feeling the tension build of the emotional dynamics. This week is about really having a bit more clarity on how to actualize that. But if you're someone who is needing to make a choice, right? A choice about your situation. If you have been thinking about this prior to October, and prior to this current Mercury retrograde, you go ahead, make the choice. But if this is something that is just coming to fruition or coming into your psychological nature, there is a call to maybe wait until after Mercury goes direct on the 18th, right? That way you feel like you can make clear action with what it is that you're supposed to be doing. This also really symbolizes a time within the collective where people are called to look at how to enact their own natural authority. Especially, I can give an example. I have a client who is getting out of a family situation. They have been pretty much living for their parents, even into adulthood. They are someone who is naturally exploring their own values and needs and is wanting to, honor those, have integrity about that path. These are all Capricorn words. And what is happening is they're in a situation where the family is pretty much turning against them, because they are not wanting to stand in line with the family values. This is someone who is, and I have had permission to share this. I just want to say this. I wouldn't be on here willy-nilly talking about it, but they are someone who is queer and who identifies as non-binary, and the family is absolutely against this, absolutely fundamentally against this, and it is dealing with their own belief systems. And so this person is having to make a choice. How do I go about doing this? How do I go about living my life in integrity? And how do I go about meeting my own needs? It was through our counseling session that they really explored the notion of how they haven't been being able to fulfill their own needs. They have been relying on the family, and that is how the family has conditioned them to be, and it has to deal with money and providing them things, you know. And that can be a tricky situation because it calls in the survival instinct, but this person is really making a choice. And I got a message from them today as this Venus is square the nodes, and they told me how they are, making a choice to go no contact for a while as a way to create this, detachment so that they can observe their situation further, which really resonates with the astrology of what's going down. So let me share my screen really quick. And I took away all of the inner lines because I feel like that can be really overwhelming for some people. So we have Mars that is going to be stationing later today. And tomorrow it will go retrograde. It will go direct. It is ruled by this Mercury that is retrograde. So everything that I've already been talking about. It is also in a type of relationship called an inconjunct. And an inconjunct, I talked a little bit about this last week, is where a planet is essentially 150 degrees away from another planet. And an inconjunct can trigger external events when there's resistance to those dynamics. And what it does is it serves to help realign. So when an external event gets triggered dealing with the archetypes of this, for my client, it certainly has been. It presents itself with a situation where it feels like a crisis of being confronted with your own inner dynamics, or it can be a crisis that has to deal with, I feel maybe disillusioned, like that what I thought about my situation, what I thought it to be true, is in fact not true. Mars is also in conjunct the south node that I'm rolling my mouse over. And so we can see that this is more about the confrontation of kind of our own hidden psychology for a lot of people, and being confronted with our inner psychological nature. And this has to deal with how we have been making choices and the motivations behind making those choices. A lot of people don't realize that their motivations behind things are, in fact, sometimes manipulative. I am someone who is brutally honest with myself, and I have had times where I was confronted on a mental level with my own hidden motivations, and it presented a crisis for me. So these are kind of the things, and it's when you're confronted with an inner dynamic of yourself from a psychological nature, you have a choice. Do I continue on, or do I hold myself accountable and walk a different path by making a different choice? This is what this whole situation is. And what this is really these three planets, Mercury, Mars, and the South Node, technically not a planet, it's a position in the sky, symbolizes what is called a finger of God. And what this is asking for is all of us, when we're confronted with our hidden agendas, our motivations behind making choices in the past, especially for some, it can be dealing with the survival instinct, or it can be dealing with, oh my gosh, the values that I've been living out are in fact not my own values. And because of that, I am seeing how that has played a part in how I go about getting what I want. So the cool thing about this is it symbolizes not only there are choices to be made and they come through the confrontation of own inner dynamics, but the fact of the matter is when you are able to go within Mercury retrograde, this sextiles this south node. And that really speaks to being able to integrate what is coming up, what is surfacing about our inner dynamics, and what is really the way that we can go about things and remain in integrity. A lot of people are realizing that they are holding double standards right now, like the hypocrisy of their own choice making, that they can do something, but other people, when they do it, it's just, awful, terrible. And so, I have a couple of clients who are dealing with that right now, really being confronted by these Capricornian dynamics of judgment. And that judgment is stemming from their conditioned beliefs. So these are all things we're looking at. We also have this Venus is squaring the nodal axis, meaning that she is 90 degrees away from the south node and 90 degrees away from the north node. Venus is ruled by this Uranus in the sign of Taurus, who is still retrograde. They are in mutual reception. Mutual reception means that they both rule each other. The ruling planet of Aquarius is Uranus, and the ruling planet of Taurus is Venus. Here's the thing. I'm going to stop share so I can look at this. The thing about a planet squaring the nodal axis is this is about recovering something, so that way we're not going back and forth between the dynamics of the south node and the north node, and not really actualizing what either one of those means. So you have Venus in the sign of Aquarius squaring, so making a T-square is what it's called, squaring the north node and the south node. Squaring the north node, Venus in Aquarius square Taurus north node, is really about liberating from old value systems, right? That are no longer in resonance with our inner relationship to self. This is about what this is. This chart this week speaks to our relationship with self. And so there is a need to be able to liberate from the old values. But here's the catch-22. There's a need to look at the psychological nature that represents how we've gone about getting our own needs met, and it pulls in this yod or finger of God with Mars and Mercury in the south node. When you're looking at a planet squaring the nodal axis, the way in which to recover something is by focusing on one of those nodes as a way to recover what it is. And through focusing on that one node, you're then able to I think this is smoke from incense. There you go. You are able to then pull in the energetics of the other node. So whenever you are able to focus on one of the nodes, then the recovery happens and it naturally pulls in the other node that is square the planet. So the way to determine this is by looking at the node that was last conjunct that planet. And this particular node is the south node. So we can see not only is the conversation with, Mercury and Mars in the south node really important to this week, but also Venus squaring the south node of Scorpio as well. So what does this mean? This means that there's a recovery and the need to objectify Aquarius, Venus and Aquarius, objectify our own status quo. And to objectify our psychological and emotional nature, South Node Scorpio, and the dynamics that we have created and the choices that we have created revolving around how we get our needs met, and whether or not there have been hidden motivations that create manipulations of situations. So a classic example of this is, this is it's a classic one, but it's a pretty in-your-face one for some. So a classic example of this, just to, let you guys pull this in, is if there is someone who is not really focusing on their relationship with their own self and they are needing survival. And so you see, someone Black Widow someone, essentially. They love bomb them. They tell them how much they like them. They mirror them. So they're like talking about the same things that they like. And it's really as a way to entrap, which is a Scorpio dynamic as well, to entrap this person into being with them so they can then enact and feel secure without ever meeting their own needs. This would be a dynamic where, in order for someone to live in their value system, they would have to go back and recover that and understand that and objectify that and see where that comes from and where that stems from, as a way to liberate from those emotional and psychological dynamics. The only way we can liberate it, from emotional and psychological dynamics, is by having an objective awareness about that. Once you become aware, it is much, much easier to start seeing the patterns that play out. And so this conversation of Venus squaring the nodal axis and to concentrate on the south node of Scorpio is to really look at the ways in which we have, gone about enacting our needs, getting those needs met. And through that discovery, we get to ask ourselves, and this pulls in that Gemini Mars and that Mercury in Capricorn, we get to ask ourselves, are these my needs? Am I able to meet my own needs now that I see the patterns and the habitual nature of my psychological makeup regarding, how I inwardly relate to myself and how I outwardly relate to others? When that awareness comes in and you start working on it, it pulls in the other node, the north node, and it helps create the liberation that is necessary. And it clears out space to create new values, new needs that are in alignment with who you are today. You're also looking at, for some, especially here in Oklahoma, where it's very sadomasochistic, people who are you're looking at survival. You're looking at survival mechanisms. People who have been subconsciously going about getting their needs met as an act of survival. And there is a need to really dive into the emotional nature of this. It takes so much self-honesty, and it takes a willingness and a conscious effort to be self-reflective. Jupiter right now is ruled by this Mars in Gemini, and Jupiter is in the sign of Aries, and this is where we are all coming to the conclusion that we need to make new belief systems. But in order to do that, it's a cardinal archetype. Same with Capricorn. It is a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So it's like feeling like, okay, I need to do this. I do this. And whenever I start to do this, I discover another layer of the onion. And so I've got to take a step back, and I've got to objectify this now. So it's literally this pulling back the layers of the onion for a lot of us as a way to create new beliefs that ultimately stem from our value system and our needs. And there is a great opportunity for those who are consciously working with this to feel and live more authentically. And it takes the courage to do that. A big thing with what's going on is with Mars and Gemini and Jupiter and Aries as well, is the archetypal nature of how you learn through these dynamics is it's fire. There's a need for freedom and independence to be able to act on the instinct of how to go about doing this. And through the external feedback that you get from acting on this, there is an opportunity for you to learn even more depths about yourself. The key with everything going on astrologically right now, with this much, cap, is to not let self-defeating thoughts perpetuate old behavior. So that is another area to look at. Why do I feel like a piece of shit? Why do I feel like I'm paralyzed by perfection? Why do I feel so judgmental against myself? The beauty of the Cancer full moon, and also just the polarity of the Capricorn energy, is there is a beautiful opportunity for all of us to dive into our emotional body and to understand our emotional makeup. This also speaks to the South Node being Scorpio and a part of focus with Venus squaring the nodal axis. I say it all the time, and I will forever say this, but the water archetypes represent the emotional body. And the only way to spiritualize or to heal is to dive into the emotional body. So when you are feeling depressed, when you are feeling like there's self-defeating thoughts, or your own worst critic and own worst judge, to dive in and to observe and really objectify where this comes from. Start labeling your own triggers and where those stem from, because this will create the objective awareness that we're all needing right now in order to formulate new choices that help us, learn even further about our emotional makeup and how to create new needs that are in alignment with ourselves. So this is my spiel for this week. I hope you guys have a fabulous week. Next week, we will have a new moon in Aquarius, and I will be here to talk about all of that. I am doing a class on the 21st at the Magic Tree here in Oklahoma City. It's in the Plaza District. It's from 12:30 to 2. I am going to be going over some foundational evolutionary astrology stuff that you can actually apply to your own natal chart. I am going to be using other people's charts as examples if they want to offer those up. We're going to be looking at Pluto, which is our soul and our prior life intentions. So it creates an imprint. We're going to be looking at the ego structure, how we feel like we can go about actualizing our dynamics through the day-to-day, moment to moment. And the south and the north nodes and the Pluto polarity point. This will give you a really great understanding on what your soul is intending to do in this lifetime, the imprints that you have from prior lifetimes. If you are someone who believes in reincarnation, if you don't, you can focus on this as your early childhood development, because when you come in, you are definitely re-experiencing the same type of conditioning factors. That's why I talk about conditioning so much. I am looking at this through the lens of evolutionary astrology. I know that a lot of people are wanting to learn about their charts. This is definitely a class where you can learn a lot and feel like when you walk away that you can look at your chart and be like, I know what this means. So if you want to do that, on my website for this week's written report, I put the flyer there. You can email me and let me know if you want to come. This is also donation based. So if money is a factor for you, don't let that discourage you if you really feel like you would get a lot out of this. I also have a show coming up at the end of this month where I'm going over the Aquarius archetype on the EA View. I will post that whenever it arises. And right now, me and a friend are putting together a whole webinar series where we are going over sexuality in the chart, and we will be focusing on Pluto, the moon, the nodes, and Mars and Venus. So as that comes up, I will be posting those webinars. For anyone who is interested or fascinated in looking at sexuality in the chart, I find it highly fascinating. It is kind of a niche area of mine that I love looking at. I bring it up with almost every client. Sometimes they're like, whoa. But here's the thing is it's not really talked about in astrology too much. And also it's a part of our life. Like, why are we going to not look at that whenever it is a huge factor? Especially, I feel like for my generation, anyone who has Pluto and Scorpio, you know that sexuality is a big thing. So I look forward to putting that out. As always, you can go on my website, you can book a session with me. I have unblocked dates recently so I can work with more of you, and I look forward to it. I will see you next week, and I will talk to you all later. Hope to connect soon.